Let's take a look at the basics of configuration for Morningstar's external source control feature. In this example, we're connected to a GenStar charge controller using the LiveView web app interface. But every Morningstar product with the ESC feature is configured in very much the same way. Here we have the LiveView main dashboard, which shows the overall operating information of the product. To configure ESC, we'll need to get into the Installer Access setup menu. To do so, we'll need to enter the Installer Access password, 141, and click the Enable button. You'll note that the Setup menu has now changed to Installer Setup. So let's take a look. In the Installer Setup menu, you'll see there's various tabs for configuration for the different areas. For the ESC configuration, we'll need both the Ready blocks and the External Source Control tabs. Let's start with the ESC tab. The first thing you may notice at the top is that it says ESC control is unassigned, which means there's been no signal assigned for stopping and starting your external source, such as a generator, a fuel cell, or other charging source. As a result, the rest of the controls on the page are grayed out and disabled. So to assign a control signal, we need to use the Ready Blocks tab. Now this GenStar has 3 blocks attached: a Ready Shunt, a Ready Relay, and a Ready BMS. We'll need to use the Ready Relay, so let's go ahead and click on that. Each Ready Relay block has 2 relays. It doesn't matter which relay you assign as a control signal. We'll use Relay A, and let's give it a name. Let's call it Fuel Cell. And we'll change the assignment from unassigned to ESC Start and Stop. And then we'll save our work. We have now assigned a control signal for ESC to Relay A. Now let's go back to the ESC tab and see what we see. At the top, you'll now notice that the ESC control signal is assigned to the Ready Relay in position 2, Relay A, and it also provides Fuel Cell, the name we provided for that relay. Now the UI here is broken down into 2 major sections. The first one is ESC timing controls, and the second one is ESC mode. ESC timing controls are 3 different timers that are kind of global fail-safe timers that prevent the generator from running too long, not running long enough, and making sure it stays off for a minimum amount of time. This is generally to prevent overcycling of your generator or cycles that are way too short, but it could also be used for other purposes. Each of the timers is disabled by default, and that's kind of how we're going to leave them for this example. The second part of the UI is the ESC mode. There's 3 different modes of operation. The first one is disabled, which turns off the feature and makes it non-usable. The second one is manual. Manual is where the user wants to be able to manually turn on and turn off your external source. This is done using the soft key on the front of the unit. It could also be done on the commands menu in LiveView interface or through Modbus command. The difference between this and versus manually mapping a relay through other means is that we still obey the ESC timing controls through the external source control feature, which means that if the user were to manually turn the source on and left it be, and you set a maximum runtime, it would turn off after the maximum runtime timer expired. So those fail-safe timers are still in effect even though you have manual control. In this demonstration, we're going to look at the custom mode. The custom mode is broken up into 2 halves. On the left side, we have this column showing the different schedule types: start charging, emergency charging, pause charging, and prohibit operation. And each of these schedules has a different type of function. These schedules are used and built in combination to build a program on the right-hand side. Now you'll notice that factory default, there's a program with two different schedules already included. That would be the emergency charging schedule and start charging 1 schedule. The emergency charging schedule, as the name implies, will stop and start your external source to prevent a pretty dire situation from occurring in your system, usually a very low battery. So if you look at the start charging criteria, it says start emergency charging when LVD warning occurs. The LVD warning is the last state before your loads will disconnect in the system. So it's using the LVD warning state as a trigger to send a signal to your external source control to start the generator or other charging source to get your battery up to a higher state of charge before your loads actually disconnect. The stop charging criteria, just below, says that when the battery voltage is greater than or equal to 14.5 volts, which means that once the battery is recharged to 14.5 volts, your charging source will be signaled to turn off. Now, both of these conditions have appended to them at the end for 5 minutes and for 1 minute. And you'll notice that these values are also underlined. This provides a little bit of filtering so that if the LVD warning state occurs for just a split second, it wouldn't necessarily trigger the start charging signal. This state has to be true for 5 minutes before we begin sending the signal to start your generator, for example. You can click on that value and shorten it. Let's say 3 minutes, and click Save. You can also click on the battery voltage itself. Let's say we didn't want to run the charging source so long, and as long as we got back up to, say, 12.5 volts, that would be just fine. The next schedule below it is the start charging schedule, and this is the day-to-day operation. We will start charging when the battery voltage is less than 11.95 volts and stop charging when the float stage has been reached. On the right-hand side, you'll notice that there's a schedule. The schedule by default is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. And then on Sundays, on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, from 9 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. All of this is completely configurable, and we'll take a look at that in a future video. But as a starting point, you can see that you can get off the ground with some basics of emergency charging and the start charging signal, and edit the basic settings to get exactly what you need. I hope this has brought some clarity to the ESC feature. Please look forward to the next videos where we get into more detail about how you can customize these programs and schedules to get exactly the operation you require for the ESC feature. Always remember to save your work, and look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much.